Kia ora. I'm so excited to be joining you to talk today about digital media, racist networks of hate, and power. With this conversation, I hope to join the ongoing thread of dialogues across the globe on the role of digital media as architectures for circulating hate. Certainly, this is an issue that has been of global concern, particularly attending to the power of digital media as sites for disseminating hate, for cultivating hate, and for really reorganizing our societies on principles of hate. What I hope to achieve through this conversation is to really center the idea of power and foreground the ways in which power impacts the creation of hateful material, the circulation of hateful material, and really building networks of profiteering from hate. In a nutshell, I hope to join the thread of conversations that actually point to the notion of hate itself being a profitable industry and connecting then the economics of hate as a site of profiteering to the politics of hate and the ways in which then mainstream politics thrives on hate and is able to mobilize it in order to create opportunities for um, consolidating power in the hands of the elite. So we will begin by looking at the question and the context of digital media, particularly. In talking about digital media, I will draw upon the fieldwork that I have been conducting and that CARE has been carrying out in India within the context of India's digital margins, as well as within the context of the massive growth of Islamophobia across India, particularly seeded by the digital architectures. I will then attend to the ways in which logics of digital media create openings for profiteering and actually um, uh, support an entire industry that goes all the way from small scale producers of hate to large transnational corporations that profit across the gamut from the circulation of hate. So this idea of hate as profit then will connect to the broader question of power and racism, attending to the role of racism in keeping existing power structures intact. So centering the question of power and control in the conversation on digital media, hate and racism really points toward the role of media architectures and media infrastructures in serving the political and economic elites. And then we will look at the ways in which power flows within the context of digital racism. In that imaginary of digital, what we actually witness empirically is that the networks of flows of conversations, of images, of postings on WhatsApp, on Twitter, actually work toward consolidating power. So broadly then, I will wrap up with the argument that contrary to the more utopian narratives about digital media being emancipatory and bringing about democracy, that what really we witness is that digital media have worked to reproduce the existing power inequalities in society, reproducing these power inequalities and working to entrench power in the hands of hegemonic actors. Now, let's begin with the narrative of digital media as sites, spaces, and resources of democratization. This narrative, of course, we saw it speak around the time of the uprisings within the context of Arab Spring, within the context of the number of resistance movements that we witnessed across the globe. And in this particular narrative, and you certainly see quite a bit of this reproduced uncritically in the communication literature, digital media are celebrated as democratizing spaces that empower or give power to everyday citizens and enable their participation in democratic processes, in processes of change. So, at a broader level, this argument works somewhat like this, that within the context of controls over media sites held by hegemonic actors, within the context of authoritarian regimes, for instance, when we discuss the role of the dominant media being controlled, digital media then are seen as emancipatory sites, as spaces for resisting and challenging the hegemonic status quo and for democratizing participatory spaces. So, really, participatory opportunities are opened up with the growth and proliferation of digital media. Now, of course, this narrative has worked well with the digital media industries as well, with Google, IBM, Facebook claiming an emancipatory role within the context of global social movements and global social change processes. In fact, spending significant amounts of investments in training activists and training advocates across the globe on principles of democracy and democratic participation. So, uncritically celebrated, this idea really refies and reproduces the techno-deterministic logic that digital media bring about transformations, they bring about democracy, and greater the penetration of digital media across the globe, the greater the opportunities for democracy. So technologies of digital media democratize. So within this backdrop, then, I would like to ask the question of the ownership of digital media and digital resources and connect this to the broader interrogation of technology capital. So these digital media and their narratives of democracy and emancipation often obfuscate the empirical evidence that most digital media architectures, platforms, infrastructures are owned by large transnational corporations. In fact, these are some of the largest transnational corporations across the globe. And these corporations profit from the securing of audiences that participate on these digital platforms. In this sense, of course, democracy is profitable, or we should say that one particular idea of democracy through participation on these platforms is profitable. They drive the advertising revenues of technology capital, as well as they create tremendous opportunities for market segmentation, market profiling for psychographic research and psychographic profiling, and the targeting of audiences. So digital media, in this sense, then really are sites for consolidation of power in the context of the consolidation of power to serve the logics of capital, to secure audiences and the base that is necessary to be sold to transnational corporations to generate profit, but also in terms of serving as resources for surveillance, where these digital technologies of participation are also pretty much the same technologies that are utilized in order to surveil our everyday behaviors, in order to codify these behaviors, and then to target us by messaging that is actually anchored in gathering our data. So the tremendous consolidation of power that we witness across the globe is paradoxically tied to this narrative of democratization. Participation itself then becomes a form of profiteering. And although one might argue that this form of participation is sold as democracy, it is anything but democratic in a sense that the architectures of the conversations, the norms within which one participates, as well as the possibilities that are opened up through participation, are very much constrained within the logics of transnational capital, within the norms, the codes, and the rules that are established by transnational capital. At the same time that we participate on these platforms, the economy of sharing, the economy of liking, the economy of commenting actually is tied to then the turning of our bodies as well as our labor as objects for profiteering. So through our labor, through our participation, through the sharing of our feelings and emotions, we actually turn into opportunities as well as networks for profiteering that supports transnational capital as well as that hegemonic forces across societies that secure control through our management and governance. So affect or emotion within this sense is circulated across digital platforms as a site of profiteering. The capacity to extract profit and to optimize it is intrinsically tied to the ability of these networks and platforms to generate affect, to speak to affect, and then to be able to circulate affect across the platform. So greater the affect that is generated, greater the profits that are generated for transnational corporations. The emphasis then of transnational technology capital is on leveraging the capacities of the platforms to maximize affect so that uh, greater and greater profits can be generated. Now, technology capital in this sense is also intrinsically related to the role of the state. Unlike the propaganda of neoliberal capital that projects the market as a space that freely moves and is emancipatory without the intervention of the state, the market for technology capital thrives on the role of the state in supporting it, in consolidating it, and in perpetuating its control. So there is harmonious relationship, a symbiotic relationship between state and the technologies of capital. First and foremost, digital technologies, any technology platform that we work with are platforms of surveillance. And these surveillance based information, the data points that are gathered through surveillance are easily turned into dominant state actors for them to assert their forms of control. So when we consider the possibilities of our democratic participation, we have to critically interrogate the role that these participatory forms play in terms of supporting these technologies of surveillance and actually enabling these technologies to map us out, to map participation out so that we can be better controlled. States are also sites of violence and once again enabled by digital technologies in terms of gathering data based on our bodies, based upon our participation, and then deploying this data to control us. At the same time, the state formations that I've been speaking of enable technology capital. So it is really through the participation of the state and through a variety of policy frameworks that the movement of technology capital is enabled. And through this process of being enabled by technology capital, um, technology capital enables the state. and that's why the back and forth symbiotic relationship. So within this structure of state, power, transnational corporations, and digital technologies, digital hate becomes a form of monetizing racism. So when we consider the deep-seated inequalities that are built in societies, often drawing upon prejudice held by the majority toward minorities, these prejudices can actually be exploited in order to serve the agendas of hegemonic political actors. Now, the technology here, the digital technology comes in as a resource or as an architecture that enables powerful political actors to draw out data, to use the data for the purposes of targeting, and to run campaigns, to run um, 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 messaging that targets us, often deploying the narrative of hate, often speaking to the prejudice of the majority toward minorities. So, in that sense, the political economy of hate is tied to the profitability of hate. Hate is profitable. The more hate moves through digital platforms, the greater revenues it generates, as well as the greater opportunities it generates for the consolidation of political power. So when you think about it from this kind of a framework, and you consider the various initiatives that are put forth by nation states in terms of regulating participation on digital platforms, you must carefully attend to this idea that the political actors that form the infrastructures of the state, in fact, profit from the circulation of prejudice, circulation of hate, and the deployment of hate in order to generate political opportunities. And this really forms the basic infrastructure of the hate industry. So the hate industry is a highly profitable industry that is globally distributed and that works through various networks of production and circulation to generate hate, to seed it, and then to magnify it across digital spaces. This then becomes the basis for political profiteering, such that political parties that are able to target audiences on the basis of hate by invoking hate are able to then capture the political market space. So power consolidates the sides of profiteering when we consider the question of digital hate. Certainly, I see this in my field work within the context of Islamophobia in India, that Islamophobia is actually seeded and circulated by a wide range of organizations, right from small scale cottage industries of hate to the Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi. I mean, all of whom across the spectrum profit from the marketing of Hindutva. Hindutva is a specific ideology of Hinduism that works by positioning Hinduism in opposition to Islam primarily, also somewhat in opposition to Christianity, and then projects this narrative of Hinduism in crisis in order to then generate messages of the Hindu revival, which becomes the basis for the political narrative of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party. So when you look at the hegemony of the BJP, much of it is connected to the capacity of the BJP information technology cell to seed and circulate hate toward Muslims, particularly through digital networks and digital infrastructures. And one would argue that this digital network of hate, whether it is on WhatsApp or whether it is on Twitter, really forms the basis for the ascendance of the BJP and the political power it holds, but also in terms of its ability then to transform the entire Indian society in the logics of hate. So digital technologies in this instance work as the new frontiers of consolidation by the continuous repeating of narratives of hate, by the continuous circulation of the narratives of hate, and by the penetration of these narratives into the everyday spaces of living and livelihood through the digital networks. We actually see the consolidation of power. Digital technologies at the same time that they do this are also the new sites of precarization. So in India, while doing my field work, for instance, I find it quite powerful to witness the extent of precarization reported by India's Muslims living in a climate of fear, living in a climate of anxiety, living with the perpetual sense that one might be attacked, that one might be the target of a mob, that one might be lynched, with the false narrative of eating beef. So misinformation in this sense that is circulated to catalyze hate is also disinformation. So those in power actively seed misinformation in order to profit from it. To conclude then, what I would like to point to is that the digital networks of hate that we see across the globe are tied to positions of power. They have a fundamental economic logic that constitutes them, and they serve as the basis of creating specific state formations that entrench the power of capital. Thank you so much for joining. I'm hoping that we would be able to have a longer conversation on this topic. So please do post your questions, and I will time and again log into the session to respond to your questions. Thank you so much for participating.